3. Hello and welcome to another edition of the C Squared Podcast. This is your host, Curtis, with my co-host, Aaliyah, and we are here with Chris, who is a member of the blog Metal Trenches, and he's also been around for a while. He's had a few other sites that he has contributed to, written for over the years, and we're going to be going deep with him into the art of blogging, the topic of blogging, music reviewing, journalism, all that fun sort of stuff, because he's been doing it for probably 10 years, I would think, at this point.
I'm up to 16.
Wow, cool. So to start us off, welcome, Chris, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Cool. And off to Aaliyah for question number 1.
All right. Hey, Chris, thanks for being here. How are you doing today?
Doing well.
Sweet. Well, to start things off, could you maybe give us a brief summary of who you are and what you do in the realms of metal?
Sure. So currently I write for Metal Trenches. I'd say I've kind of become our written guy. So Flight of Icarus started off doing, mostly written as well. And he's pretty much transformed everything into, YouTube video podcasts. And so it's a really interesting opportunity because he does lots of video content. I do all the written content. I think it's a good mix of old and new. And I've been on the podcast a couple of times. I finally did video for the first time for our Dark Throne tier list. Was previously just doing audio before that. So I'd like to get into some more video with him where it fits, and been, as I said, blogging for 16 years. Had a video game music website for a long time before that, and then wrote for Transcending Obscurity, which went down around the beginning of 2018, decided that it was going to be just a record label versus a record label plus a blog plus PR, which I don't blame him. He was taking on a ton of stuff. So yeah, it's been great to be at Metal Trenches. A lot of freedom, lets me cover whatever I want, which is always great.
Awesome. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into music journalism?
Sure. So it was completely on accident. So as I said, I ran a video game website. It was called Cosmos Gaming. So I've always been into video game journalism. So I used to read as a kid. I'd read all the print magazines that came out to try to get updates and figure out, what I wanted to save my allowance towards. And I think when I was 10 or 11 years old, I was like, I think I can do this. So I just started trying to write my own reviews, and it turned into connecting up with some websites very young. And then when I was probably 15 in 2003, I got a domain using money orders. Didn't have a credit card or anything at that point, and just started emailing companies saying, hey, I want to put your press releases on my website. I don't want free stuff. I just want to be able to post news, and just started calling companies, emailing companies. And through that, I worked with companies that did multiple, industries. So I believe the company was called Electric Artists. They did video games, movies, films, and music. And so they ended up sending me, I think, a copy of Bruce Dickinson's solo album from 2005 in 2005. And I was already listening to rock and heavy metal and kind of going down the early internet rabbit hole, finding new music. So I said, okay, I like music well enough. I'll give this a try. And so my approach was, I don't want to be super verbose and complicated. I want to just break it down into, what band is this? What are they about? What are the instruments like? What are the, the vocals like? Because I'm a drummer. I used to play drums for a long time. So I'm not really a vocal person. I don't focus on lyrics very much. So I don't do that in my reviews. And so it just kind of snowballed from there, and making more and more contacts. And, this is in the days where I'd come back from high school, get off the bus, and my parents' mailbox would be overflowing with CD mailers. So you just come back and you have like 40 CDs at a time. And you just be like, I don't know what I got now, but this is what we're going to do. We'll see what happens.
Wild. That must have been an experience. Gosh, that's such a throwback, thinking about the times when we were kids and we didn't have credit cards and we bought stuff on eBay and yep. Whatever. Curtis, do you have a follow-up?
My mute button, I had to press. Yes, I do have a follow-up question. So how did you kind of go from, well, I don't know how I want to say go from, but how did you kind of have it where you had video games and metal music on the same blog? How did you kind of space that out? I don't even remember. It was such a long fucking time ago.
It's still online. I actually pay to keep it online because I don't want that much of my life to disappear off the internet.
Fair. Fair.
So I would say we didn't do it very well in the beginning. We just had separate sections and, early internet, not CO oriented at all, just like basically just like a giant database and a content management system. And we finally moved it over to WordPress in, when was that? 2010, 2011. And once it was on WordPress, I had a kind of like a co-owner at that point who was helping me to fund and do things. And so we had the layout designed where left side was gaming and movies, right side was music, and it had a different color scheme depending on where you were. So it was like blue for games and movies, and then I think orange for music. So it was really easy to tell what you were doing. But kind of what led to the downfall of that was the co-owner actually backed out. He got bored of doing it. And so I lost some financial backing that way. And then I lost most of my other staff that weren't music at that point. And we reached a point where we were only updating music articles because that's all I was interested in doing it after a certain point. And I think I finally just got tired of all the comments saying, how does a video game site able to do such good music reviews? We don't understand it. I'm like, you can't do both.
Get it. So let me ask you this though. So you're paying for it to still be up.
Yep.
So I know I get it, but you know what I mean? Like why, even though you don't, you know what I mean?
It's partially just so I can still see it and accessibility. And so I've lost a lot of computers over the years and I have hard drives spread all over the place. And to have everything posted in one place, it's also really helpful for me if I'm reviewing a band that, hey, first album in 10 years. Did I review this band 10 years ago? I can go find out.
I get it.
And I can still point people to it. I still have the history. It's really a nostalgia thing at this point. And, maybe one day there'll be a reason to bring it back. It's, when you've had a domain for 18 years at this point, it's like, don't want to let it go.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I got one more question that Aaliyah didn't have, but I kind of want to go into, like, you then went on to Transcending Obscurity, I think, after that.
Yep.
Cool. Which was mainly focused rather on the heavier end of things. And you were doing a lot of premieres and stuff on that site, if I'm recalling correctly. I'm pretty sure we were doing a lot. So what was kind of, how come that ended? Are you able to say, or
burnout?
Just burnout.
So I'll put it this way. I was basically working a full day job, 8, 9, 10 hours, coming home and then putting 2 or 3 hours into premieres pretty much every night. And this is purely a volunteer position for me. I do it because I want to help the bands. And, at the time, Kuno Horan's Transcending Obscurity was really trying to focus on the label. So I was like, you make money off ads, whatever, you put it back into the label. I have no issue with that. We're helping bands either way. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was, premieres are a very finite, time limited type of thing. Your traffic bottoms off kind of once the album's out. So what I was trying to do to counter that was I was writing 200-300 word articles for a song premiere, doing interviews, and it was just so much work. And I found in a lot of cases that once you started doing an interview for one premiere, everybody wanted you to do them, but the bands didn't always want to do them. So, I was putting like 3-4 hours into an interview and I get like 3-4 sentence answers back. And,
I hate that.
it was like you get some really good ones and you get some really bad ones. And then after a while, it just kind of really burnt me out. And now, having gotten married at the end of 2020 and kind of being in a very different place with trying to start a family down the road and doing things like that, premieres are just kind of out of my league since it's not my main day job anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I did appreciate about you writing for them back then, because most people don't put in the effort, but then I guess if they're not really reciprocating, the bands aren't reciprocating, then it's not worth your time at the same time. So
yeah, and I appreciate all the really good ones that I got back. Like I valued whenever I'd be like, whoa, I got like 5-page Word doc back on this. This is amazing. But
yeah, no, I get it. So just as an aside for our listeners, a lot of times, not like when they do premieres at sites, a lot of times it's just like a little blurb that the writer does. But again, it's because of the issue what Chris was just saying, where a lot of times the band doesn't really put in the effort, so that's why they stop doing it a lot of the times. I think I'm done on that end of things, Aaliyah, if you wanted to continue.
Okay, well, could you maybe explain how you got started at Metal Trenches and what that transition looked like?
Sure. So I kind of stopped updating my site Cosmos Gaming at the beginning of 2016. So then for 2 years, I wrote for Transcending Obscurity. And the idea behind that blog was he was running a record label full time, but he wanted to go back to his roots and do like a webzine on the side. And so he recruited a lot of writers from other sites. I think Flight Icarus probably talked about this very briefly. And so he recruited a bunch of people via Facebook that he was already sending review material out via his label. It was like, hey, I want to just come together and do this. Did that for about 2 years. And then right as I was starting to hit burnout and was like, premieres are killing me. I just want to go back to reviews and, interviews that are kind of on a non-time limited term. He announced he wanted to shut the webzine down. So then it was like, okay, what do I do? Do I start back up my, half dead website, or what do I want to do? And I was talking to Flight of Icarus, and he was like, you can just come over to Metal Trenches and just write whatever you want. I won't tell you what to do. Like, we just have a Google Doc if you just want to put stuff up so that we don't overlap on bands too much. And so it just kind of took off. It was like, okay, I have somewhere I can go, somewhere I can be. And it's actually great now because we had a couple like writers off and on that were with us that now it's just Flight and myself. And now that he's really doing video, even if we overlap, it's like double content, right? So we actually don't overlap as much as you would expect. But for like the new Every Time I Die, it was like, I really love that band. I want to do a written. He already did a video. So we just did double content. So there are good opportunities for that. But he kind of sees it as everything I write that's different from what he does video. It's so much more content and so many other bands that we can cover. And we're always looking for new ways to cover as much as we can, with both of us being fairly time limited for as much as we do.
Yeah. So do you feel like that the fact that there's not as much overlap is due to your musical tastes, or different factors, different deciding factors?
I would say it's a little bit of both. So I skew more towards the extreme side these days, more black metal, death metal, but I always need palate cleansers when I'm doing that. So I always try to do a little bit of, all right, I've been doing too much death metal. If I can't get good words out, I'll go and do like prog rock album, or, hard rock album, or doom, or something else, just to feel a good palate cleanser. And I think, Flight Icarus has really been in the mathcore metalcore scene. He does his fair share of like black and death metal, but he's got his kind of core base of what he does too. And we overlap I listen to a lot of that stuff as well, but I think he finds it. He has more of a network in that side than I do. And I know he's been targeting bigger bands in order to try to drive some of the traffic on the videos, which I don't do as much of. Sometimes I do it just for fun, nostalgia, to go back. Like I decided to reach out and ask Epic Records for the new Chevelle album, just get a stream of that. When that came out early in the year, I was like, you know what, this is a throwback. Why not? We'll see what they sound like these days. So I will tackle bigger bands like that every once in a while. But, for me, if I get something that's just crazy heavy, good gym workout, it's kind of what I gravitate towards.
Yeah. So with that in mind, what do you think are like the major factors that make you decide that you want to review an album or a band?
It's a mix of timely. So we really try to review stuff as close to release or post-release as possible. And I kind of like, Flight Icarus's mantra on this, which is, why do we review it as soon as we get a promo? If we get a promo 3 months ahead of time, no one's going to remember it if you write it up in the first week, because it's not out for 3 more months. So we're big on like trying to cover it when it comes out. And then if we miss it, we try to come back to it. For me, it's basically a factor of how much time I have. I'm at the point now where my current goal is maybe 2 or 3 a week if I can get to it. It doesn't always work out that way. I've had complete schedule overhauls and then had to drop stuff. But any promo I get or any email I get, I always check it out. And, I open things up. I listen to usually track 2 as a starting point, because there's intro tracks on a lot of records. I give it about 15 to 20 seconds. And if it sounds at least reasonable to my ears, I'll probably download it and put it on the hard drive for potential future. And then it comes down from whittling those hundreds of albums coming in to, all right, what can I cover this week? And, if I could do this and get like paid for it in a way that would sustain my family, I'd probably be doing everything that came in. But, I realize at this point where we are and when I'm still doing it more as a hobby and really wanting to support the bands, that I really just hone in on what seems to be the best for me at this point. It's anything that I would rank probably a C+ or higher. I just don't have the time for something that I absolutely hate. And there's no point. I always want it to be constructive criticism or better. I'm not one that just wants to openly just hate bands for the sake of hating it. I think there's plenty of other people that do that and that's their deal and that's fine. But I'm really I want it to be a positive experience to draw people in, even if you're saying might be better next time, but you should still give them support now.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and go ahead.
I'll let you go. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I know I saw that under the submission page that even Flight of Icarus said that generally he only does stuff that he likes. He's not going to review something that's like a really bad score.
I think he's done a little bit more of that recently with like Ice Nine Kills and some of those bands, but it really depends. I think he said he still has to have some sort of interest in it. So okay, I hate this aspect of it, but I can still respect this piece of it.
Right. Go ahead, Curtis.
I was just going to ask you, is there any type of genre in the metal genre, obviously, that you will not touch with the 10-foot pole?
Not really. I've actually tried to branch out, but then it fails in the end because I end up going back to what I know. So I actually said at the beginning of this year that I wanted to do more heavy metal, symphonic metal, gothic metal, and like, actual sung vocals. That lasted for about 2 months. And then I went back. There was just too much on the extreme side that I was interested in that kind of took over my portfolio. So, it's kind of one of those, I'll find what I like within those styles. And if there's something and I'm like, oh, I got to do this, I'll still branch out and do my heavy metal band here and there. I did covered the Brainstorm album that came out in September, which is, long running power metal band. So I like to throw some wild cards in there every once in a while. But even if I say, yeah, I'm just going to do this genre for a month, then, somebody will send me something on the other end of the spectrum. And I'm like, oh,
yeah, no, I get it. So just to kind of follow up with that, because you said that you would only review bands if you thought that you liked the album after listening to the first 30 seconds, I think is what you said. So have you ever been pressured to review something and then you did it as a favor for someone and it was just like, you couldn't do it?
Not really. I mean, I tried to review all the CDs that came in the early days, and that involved some stuff I didn't like at all. And I gave it some, negative scores, and I had independent bands emailing me being like, you're going to take our sales down. And I'm like, well, you sent it to me and I did it.
Yeah.
But, at this point, it's really, I try not to go that route. I mean, I think sometimes I do favor certain people that I have relationships with that maybe I'll look at their stuff first, but it's never a direct ask. It's more, I just know that certain places have the type of music I gravitate towards, and that kind of helps versus, somebody coming in cold and it helps that everybody knows me at this point that I've worked with. And I always make the point that if I rate something, you will get the link as soon as it goes up. I won't make you search for it. I'll email it immediately. But if you don't hear from me, it's usually because I don't have the time and I don't want to over promise and then have my entire schedule fall apart and have people wondering, you said you were going to do this. Why didn't you do it? So I kind of take that approach these days.
Yeah, no, that's the worst on the PR end is when you get told or that, yeah, I'm considering it, or it's probably going to happen, or it's in the bag. And then it's like, it never happens. And you're just like, fuck, that sucks. I don't know what I wanted to follow up with, Aaliyah. Did you have another question on this? We got about 7 minutes left, just so you guys both know.
Yep.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to ask a little bit about your ranking system on Metal Trenches. You rank albums in 3 areas: musicianship, innovation, and enjoyability. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you guys do it that way?
Sure. So I'll admit I came into scoring when I worked for Cosmos Gaming and worked for myself. I didn't do any kind of scores at all. It was purely written. This is what it is. Transcending Obscurity had a ranking system that was like good, great. I think it was like essential listening, like pretty good. And then coming to Metal Trenches, I had to adapt to his scoring system. He was like, this is how we do it. And he and I view, I think, some of the metrics a little bit differently. So when he looks at like innovation, he really values how different is this from anything I've ever heard before or within the genre. I kind of take it a little bit differently. I look at that approach, but then I also score it based on if I've heard this band before, what are they doing in this album that they weren't doing in the previous album? So where he might say, oh, this is a 7 for innovation. I've heard this before. I might say, well, they're at least attempting different stuff. I'll give this a B or like an 8 because I feel like they're trying to do something different for themselves, even if they have an established sound. And so I kind of, my scores I think tend to be a little bit higher than his just because of that. Sometimes the innovation is the limiting factor. From the enjoyability side, it's really, how stoked was I when I went through this? How much do I think I'm going to enjoy this? A month or two from now, that kind of makes a difference between is it an 8, 9, or a 10? If I try to stick with that metric, it'll be okay. I really, really like it. Do I think I'm going to love it at like year end? So say it's like February. If it's a 10, it means, yeah, I'll probably be wanting to circle back to this in December, even if it came out in February. And then for musicianship, it's, I think Flight of Icarus again kind of looks at technicality there in a lot of things. He looks at, the complicated nature of the music and then the memorability. For me, it's kind of both. I value memorable songwriting over pure technicality for me. I kind of like what riffs do I remember from an album. It's actually why I find it really funny that last week I gave Archspire a really good score because I was like, wow, tech death I actually like because it's super, super complicated, but it's really catchy too. And so I value those kind of things. And so it took a while, I'd say when I first started with him in 2018, I was kind of like, why do we have to do these scores? I don't know, but I've kind of come into it and we both make it our own, I think.
I'll go next. I got a question right here. So let's say that you get someone to pitch you, or someone pitches you rather. What is something that totally will turn you off and make you like not want to listen to the album?
So I'd say having untagged MP3s in ways that make it really difficult to take the music and put it on other platforms. So I'm still kind of wary of stream only in a lot of circumstances. I understand why certain labels do it. I've come to the decision that I think Holix really needs an app for the mobile phones, which I'm hoping at one point they'll do, because anything that I get that's limited to stream only just seems to not want to cooperate with my phone through like a mobile browser. It's choppy and then there's issues with that. So I'd say anything that makes the experience hard, or if you're surprisingly bands still mail individual MP3s in attachments in an email, stuff like that.
I hate it so much. What else other than that? Anything like personality wise or the way they pitch you other than what you said?
Not really. I'd say I don't get as many individual band requests as I think Flight of Icarus does, because he's kind of managed the Facebook page, and even though I had him put my email in the autoresponder, so we actually were getting so many requests that we told people we have an autoresponder on Facebook to say, hey, can you please not use this? Can you actually email us? We'll check that. And sometimes they email both of us, sometimes they don't. But I think the majority of pitches that I go through right now are either through a label or a PR company. It's just a little bit cleaner, I feel like.
Yeah. What were you gonna say?
I mean, I won't say no to an independent band if they come to me and they have all the right stuff. I've still done that, but it's just easier schedule wise to, you have somebody sending you through one of the 4 major, promotion platforms that are out there, be it like Promo Jukebox, Holix, any of that stuff. You kind of know what you're getting and you have an established, easy way to access the music. Yeah,
no, that makes sense. Aaliyah, we're running out of time. Do you got a final question you want to ask them?
No, not really. I feel like we could ask, just to clarify on that point, then that means that a band has a better chance of getting reviewed if they're going through a PR or they're going through a professional service of some kind that allows them to send it through one of those major platforms.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I would say for my purposes, that definitely is the case. And I've noticed more and more bands actually going through platforms like that where they're paying for it for a short period of time.
Right.
And it does make a difference, I mean, everybody can just dump their stuff on Dropbox and then, it's like a sea of promo stuff. And I feel like they're not winning if they're doing that because, Dropbox, you can just pass around everywhere. Where if you're sending me a specialized email through one of the systems, it's more secure, you have more control over it. And so I feel like it's more professional on both ends of the spectrum, both from my side and from, band side.
And the best thing about it is the band goes and signs up for that. They can see who has opened the promo and they can see who has listened to it. So that's
Right.
the other part about it too. So I think that's about it, Chris, because we're at the time. Do you have any final want to say before we end off?
I just want to say thanks for having me on. I was actually talking to Flight of Icarus recently saying that, I've been doing this for 16 years. It's great to have somewhere to talk about origins and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, now if anybody else wants to ask about how we were doing things, how I was doing things like 10, 15 years ago, always happy to come on and talk about it because it's like a lost art at this point. And CD mailers, all the stuff that went along with that, it's just a whole different world these days for everyone coming into it now.
I agree 100%. So with that, Aaliyah, take us home.
Everyone, until next time, make like a bull and throw those horns up.